Welcome to my garden. GinGee GoodEarth, keep on filling, be a flower. Art and prosperity of fillings, flower. This is a good time to consider formally helping others. Your determination will bring you much success. You will inherit some money or a small piece of land. The secret of getting ahead is getting started. Welcome to my garden. This is Ginger Lily, and I will be reading from several books. The Universal History of the United States of America. I'll be introducing my iLook studio, and also I'm here to educate, amuse, enrich, and the importance of civility, nice manners. All the programs that I have created are fun-filled, artistic, and of course educational. You can reach me at gibsongirls@mail.com. Any of the books that I have made by hand you can purchase on Etsy.com. My store name is Wild Trout Lily. I welcome you today, and I'm going to start the program with a poem called Floating. As I drift floating among the clouds in the sky, I see the stars are closer now that I am so high. The moon shines on the trees, the waves, and me, as I whisper with the wind so far above the sea. As I glide among the heavens, too light to care, the burden of life becomes too heavy to bear. As the link to my soul stretches thin through the sky, I know I have nothing to live for, but no reason to die. I consider the shape of my destiny. I hover on the brink of being free. Yearningly I strain, wanting just once to touch the moon, knowing my soul will not bathe in her illumination again soon. Resolutely, I turn my back for a time on the stars, facing again the world of hypocrites, gangs, and bars. Walking on moon rays, floating in starlight, free in the night, I return to live in the daylight. Written by Larissa Brittany Johnson. The book title is Poetry by LBJ, and you can write to me on Wild Trout Lily, Etsy.com, Etsy, and I will be glad to send it to you. Each book is $30. Okay, have a great day. Now let's get started. I want to start again on the introduction of the universal history of the United States of America. This embraces the whole period from the earliest discoveries down to the present time. The book is written by C.B. Taylor and it was published in New York by Ezra Strong. 1988, the original publication was 1930. This is the preface. In collecting materials for this work, the author has, as may be seen from the copiousness of his table of contents, studied brevity of style. Brevity is another word for simplicity. This for the multiplicity of subjects contained in the volume he deemed essentially necessary. Another important point of light those principles of political and religious freedom to secure which many of our ancestors sacrificed their homes, their fortunes, and even their lives. We cannot but admire the courage, perseverance, and virtues of our progenitors. When we contemplate the obstacles surmounted by them, the hardships endured, and the unshrinking firmness of purpose which turned a wilderness into fruitful fields, established a government of equal laws, and provided an asylum for those oppressed of all nations. Having learned, at least to some extent, to appreciate the value of those blessings which have descended to the prosperity of the pilgrims, the author would now contribute his mite for the benefit of the present and future generations. This work is designed for a family and school book, and is also intended as a substitute for those more voluminous works that find their way to the few, only whose resources are sufficient to procure them. The size of the type on which this volume is printed has enabled the publisher to present to his readers more matter than was originally intended for the work, and to give in a duodecimo form the quantity of reading commonly found in an octavo volume. Octavo just means book. Although presented to the public in a condensed form, it will be found to contain the most important events in the general history of this country. The comparative population, wealth, resources, and progressive improvement in the states and territories have been particularly noticed, and I will be found a source of useful information to those who may design to change their present places of abode. One entire chapter of this work is devoted to a few of the western states and territories, giving a description of the face of the country, the soil and productions, situation and extent, rivers, increase of population, settlements. This is designed by the author to convey a useful table of information to all its readers. But is inserted more particularly for the benefit of those who intend to immigrate. So now we're going into the introduction, and this is in regards to birth, education, and early.
Tomorrow never comes. Today is all we have. So savor every minute on this stage called life. Celebrate the day as we welcome the Nose Sisters, Rose Nose and Nabilia Nose, Nettie Nose for short. Marlon Brando covers the waterfront. Martha Stewart covers the home and garden.
Okay, that was a program that I was involved with at community television on recycling, reuse, and renew for success in life. And I had a program called the Nose Sisters. And again, Rose Nose was my character, and Nabilia Nose was another person's character. It was very well received, and I do work on recycling and renewing and reuse for success. And again, the state of Pennsylvania, we have done great wonders in our pollution problems with air, land, and water. We have the cleanwater.org website, and again, you can look up earthjustice.com for informationals on environment and ecology. And so a lot of fun stuff. And I want to go back to the introduction of the book, The Universal History of the United States of America. Okay, so there's a couple things. I have to take breaks because I have to coordinate so many things, and there's no time to edit anything at all. So I want to be very clear on that. Okay, here's the introduction. Birth, education, and early life of Columbus. His discovery of America and discoveries by Cabot, Hudson, and others. Christopher Columbus, or Colombo as the name is written in Italian, was born in the city of Genoa about the year 1435, of poor but reputable and meritorious parentage. He was the son of Domenico Colombo, a wool comber, so he was involved with sheep herding and the collecting of wool, and Susanna Fontana Rosa, his wife. And his ancestors seem to have followed the same trade for several generations in Genoa. Attempts have been made to prove him of illustrious descent, and several noble houses have laid claim to him, since his name has become so renowned as to confer rather than receive distinction. It is possible some of them may be in the right, for the feuds in Italy in those ages had broken down and scattered many of the noblest families, and while some branches remained in the lordly heritage of castles and domains, others were confounded, and the humblest population of the cities. The fact, however, is not material to his fame, and it is higher proof of merit to be the object of contention among various noble families than to be able to substantiate the most illustrious lineage. Illustrious lineage. His son, Fernando, had a true feeling on the subject. I am of opinion, says he, that I should derive less dignity from any nobility of ancestry than from being the son of such a father. Columbus was the oldest of 4 children. I just have to double check. Columbus was the oldest of 4 children, having 2 brothers, Bartholomew and Giacomo, or as his name is translated in Spanish, Diego, and 1 sister of whom nothing is known, excepting that she was married to a person in obscure life, called Giacomo Bavarolo. Now I am having difficulty in pronouncing words, but there is no time to edit, and I must get through this book. So I still hope you enjoy it, even with my grammar mistakes and my pronunciation. I have a signature pronunciation. I've always had difficulty with language and pronunciation, so I hope that I try to be clear and concise with clarity as I'm reading. Okay, getting back, page 6, the introduction. While very young, Columbus was taught reading, writing, grammar, and arithmetic, and made some proficiency in drawing. In the background music, this is White Buffalo Spirit. I play the drums, the horse knots for galloping, the tambourine, the rain stick, and you'll hear that in the background. But the Bolivian recorder is also being played. Getting back to page 6, he soon convinced a strong passion for geographical knowledge and an irresistible inclination for the sea. And in afterlife, when he looked back upon his career with a solemn and superstitious feeling, he regarded his early determination of his mind as an impulse from the deity, guiding him to the studios and inspiring him with the inclinations proper to fit him for the high hymn with the high degrees he was destined to accomplish. His father, I'm just checking the videos for the photos. This is Hannistown, by the way, and it was completely a barren field, and the cornerstones were found, and it took, I would say, 40 years to rebuild Hannistown. And you can look that up on the internet. It's located in Greensburg, PA. He soon evinced a strong passion for geographical knowledge and an irresistible inclination for the sea. And in after life, when he looked back upon his career with a solemn and superstitious feeling, he regarded this early determination of his mind as an impulse from the deity, guiding him to the studies and inspiring him with the inclinations proper to fit him for the high degrees he was destined to accomplish. His father, seeing the best of his mind, endeavored to give him an education suitable for maritime life. He sent him therefore to the University of Pavia, where he was instructed in geometry, geography, astronomy, and navigation. He acquired also familiar knowledge in the Latin tongue, which at that time was the medium of instruction, and the language of the schools. He remained but a short time at Pavia, barely sufficient to give him the rudiments of the necessary sciences. The thorough acquaintance with them which he displayed in after life must have been the result of diligent self-schooling and of casual hours of study, amidst the cares and vicissitudes of a rugged and wandering life. The sky is the limit. He was one of those men of strong natural genius who appear to form themselves from having to contend at their very outset with privations and impediments, acquired intrepidity in braving and facility in vanquishing difficulties. Such men learn to effect great purposes with small means, supplying the deficiency of the latter, but the resources of their own energy and invention. This is one of the remarkable features of the history of Columbus. In every undertaking, the scantiness and apparent insufficiency of his means enhanced the grandeur of his achievements. Shortly after leaving the university, he entered into nautical life and, according to his own account, began to navigate at 14 years of age. A complete obscurity rests upon the part of his history. It is supposed he made his first voyage with one Colombo, a hardy captain of the seas, who had risen to some distinction by his bravery, and who was a distant connection of his family. The seafaring life in those days was peculiarly full of hazard and enterprise. Even a commercial expedition resembled a warlike cruise, and the maritime merchant had often to fight his way from port to port. Piracy as almost legalized. The frequent feuds between the Italian states and the cruisings of the Catalonians, the armadillo fitted out by noblemen who were petty scavengers in their own domains, the roving ships and squadrons of private adventurers, and the holy wars waged with the Mohammedan powers, rendered the narrow seas to which navigation was principally confined scenes of the most hardy encounters and trying reverses. Such was the rugged school in which Columbus was reared. Such was the rugged teacher that first broke him into naval discipline. There is an interval of several years during which we have but one or two shadowy traces of Columbus, who is supposed to have been principally engaged in the Mediterranean and up the Levant, sometimes in voyages of commerce, sometimes in warlike contests between the Italian states, sometimes in pious and predatory expeditions against the infidels, during which time he was often under the perilous command of his old fighting relation, the veteran Colombo. Columbus arrived at Lisbon about the year 1470. He was at that time in the full vigor of manhood, and of an engaging presence, and here it may not be improper
Tomorrow never comes. Today is all we have. So savor every minute on this stage called
to draw his portrait according to the minute descriptions given of him by his contemporaries. He was tall, well-formed, and muscular, and of an elevated and dignified demeanor. His visage was long, and neither full nor maigre, of his complexion fair and freckled, and inclined to ruddy, his nose aquiline, his cheekbones were rather high, his eyes light gray, and apt to enkindle. His whole countenance had an air of authority. His hair in his youthful days was light-colored, but care and trouble soon turned it gray, and at 30 years of age it was quite white. He was moderate and simple in diet and apparel, eloquent in his discourse, engaging and affable with strangers, and of an amiableness and suavity in domestic life. that strongly attached his household to his person. His temper was naturally irritable, but he subdued it by the magnanimity of his spirit, magnanimous, comporting himself with a courteous and gentle gravity, and never indulging. He was noted for strict attention to the offices of religion. The Sabbath was so to him a day of sacred rest, on which he would never sail from a port, unless in a case of extreme necessity. While at Lisbon, he became acquainted with a lady of the rank named Donna Philippa, who resided in the convent. The acquaintance soon ripened into attachment and ended in marriage. When Columbus had once formed his theory, it became fixed in his mind with singular firmness. He set it down as a fundamental principle that the earth was a terra aqueous globe, which might be traveled round from east to west, and that men stood foot to foot when opposite points. The great men, when about 40 years of age, formed the idea of reaching the East Indies by sailing westward. His fortune being small, and the attempt requiring effectual patronage, he laid his plan before the Senate of Genoa, desirous that his native country should profit if he was successful. This scheme, however, appearing chimerical, was rejected. He then repaired to the court of Portugal, and although the Portuguese were at that time distinguished for their commercial spirit, and John II, who then reigned, was discerning and enterprising prince, yet the prejudices of the great men in his court to whom the matter was referred caused Columbus finally to fail in his attempt there also. He next applied to Ferdinand and Isabella, king and queen of Aragon and Castile, and at the same time sent his brother Bartholomew, who followed the same profession and who was well qualified to fill the immediate place under such a leader, to England, to lay the proposals before Henry VII, which likewise, very fortunately for the future well-being of the country, met with no success. Many were the years which Christopher Columbus spent in affectionately attendance at the Castilian court. The impoverished state into which the finances of the United Kingdom were reduced by the war with Grenada repressed every disposition to attempt great designs. But the war being at length terminated, the powerful mind of Isabella broke through all obstructions. She declared herself the patroness of Columbus, while her husband Ferdinand, declining to partake as an adventurer in the voyage, only gave it the sanction of his name. Thus did the superior genius of woman effect the discovery of one half of the globe. The ships sent out on this important search were only 3 in number, 2 of them very small, with 90 men, victualled from a year's village. Although the expense of the expedition had long remained the sole obstacle to this undertaking, yet when everything was provided, the cost did not amount to more than $16,500, for which purpose the Queen disposed of her jewels to raise the amount. Columbus he set sail from the port of Palos in the province of Andalusia, August 3rd, 1492. He proceeded to the Canary Islands, and thence directed his course due west in the latitude of about 28 north. In this course he continued for 2 months, without falling in with any land, which caused such a spirit of discontent and mutiny to arise, as the superior address and management of the commander became unequal to suppress, although for those qualities he was immediately distinguished. He was at length reduced to the necessity of entering into a solemn engagement to abandon the enterprise and return home, if land was not discovered in 3 days. Probably he would not have been able to retain his men so long from acts of violence and outrage, in pursuing so untried and dreary a course, had they not been sensible that their safety in returning home depended very much on his skill as a navigator in conducting the vessel. Again, he was eminently distinguished. About midnight of the 11th of October, 1492, the cry was, "Land! Land!" which proved to be one of the Bahama Islands, which Columbus named San Salvador. It was only Teltri, DEG, 30 minutes latitude to the south of the island of Janorma, one of the Canaries, whence he took his departure. This navigator was still so confident in the opinion he had formed before he undertook the village, that he believed himself then to be on an island which was situated adjacent to the Indies. Proceeding toward the south, he saw 3 other islands which he named St. Mary, Ferdinand, and Isabella. At length he arrived at a very large island, and he had taken 7 of the natives of San Salvador on board. He learned from them that its name was called Cuba, but he gave it the name Yuana. He next proceeded to an island which he had called Espanola, in honor of the kingdom by which he was employed, and it still bears the name of Hispaniola. Here he built a fort and formed a small settlement. He then returned home, having on board some of the natives whom he had taken from the different islands. On the passage, he was overtaken by a storm which had nearly proved fatal. During the storm, Columbus hastily enclosed a cake of wax, a short account of his voyage and discovery, which he hoped, should he perish, might fall into the hands of some navigator, or be cast ashore, and thus the knowledge of his discovery be preserved to the world. But the storm abated, and he arrived safe. Don't look back. He arrived safe in Spain, March 15th, 1493, having been 7 months and 11 days on this most important voyage. On his arrival, letters patent were issued by the King and Queen, confirming to Columbus and to his heirs all the privileges contained in an agreement which had been enacted before his departure. Not only the Spaniards, but the other nations of Europe seem to have adopted the opinion of Columbus in considering the countries which he had discovered as part of India, whence Ferdinand and Isabella gave them the name Indies, in the ratification of their former agreement with Columbus. Even after the error was detected, the name was retained under the appellation of West Indies. Nothing could possibly tend more effectually to rouse every active principle of human nature than the discoveries which Columbus had made. No time was lost or expense spared in preparing a fleet of ships with which this great man should revisit the countries he had made known. 17 ships were made ready in 6 months, and 1,500 persons embarked on board of them, among whom were many noble families, who had filled honorable stations. Ferdinand, now desirous of securing the benefits of these discoveries, applied to the Pope to be invested with the right in their newly discovered country, as well as to all future discoveries in that direction. But as it was necessary that there should be some favor of religion in the business, he founded his plea on desire of converting the savage natives to the Romanish faith, which plan had its desired effect. Romish faith. Columbus sailed from the port of Cadiz on the 25th of September, 1493. When he arrived at Hispaniola, he had the affliction to find that all the Spaniards whom he had left there amounted to 36 in number, and had been put to death by the natives in revenge for their insults and outrage which they had committed. After tracing out the plan of a town in a large plain near a spacious bay, and giving it the name of Isabella in honor of his patroness, the Queen of Castile, and appointed his brother to preside as deputy governor in his absence, Columbus, on the 24th of April, 1494, don't look back, sailed with 1 ship and 2 small barks to make further discoveries in the seas. In this voyage he had employed 5 months, and fell in with many small islands on the coast of Cuba, but none of any importance except the island of Jamaica. Soon after his return to Hispaniola, he resolved to make war with the Indians, who amounted to 100,000 men. They, having experienced every lawless act of violence from their invaders, were rendered extremely inveterate and thirsting for revenge, a disposition which appears to have been foreign to their natures. Having collected his whole force, he attacked them by night, while they assembled on the wide plain, and obtained a most decisive victory, without the loss of a single man on his part. The effect of cannon and firearms, the noise of which was appalling — commotion is always a technique in the art of war — employed against a numerous body of Indians, closely drawn together, was in the highest degree of destructive. Columbus had brought over with him a small body of cavalry. The Indians, who had never before seen such a creature, imagined the Spanish horses to be rational beings, and that each with its rider formed by one animal, they were astonished at their speed, and considered their impetuosity and strength as irresistible. Numbers were slain, and many made prisoners, who were immediately consigned to slavery. At the departure of Columbus from Spain, he was appointed governor of the New World. But by the false representation of his enemies, the king was persuaded to appoint another in his place. The king also gave orders that Columbus should be seized and sent to Spain, and was executed, and the heroic Columbus returned to Spain in irons. He was set at liberty by the king on his... there's a lot of ink blots in the book. He was set at liberty by the king on his survival, but never recovered his authority. After his return from his fourth village, finding Isabella, his patroness, dead, he sunk beneath his misfortunes and died May 20th, 1506, in the 70th year of his age. So he lived till he was 70. In 1497, John Cabot and his son commenced a voyage of discovery, and on the 24th of June discovered the island of Newfoundland, which they gave the name of Prima Vesta. Leaving this, they fell in with a small island, which they called St. John's. The French attempted no discoveries until 1524. In 1584, Sir Walter Raleigh, under the commission of Queen Elizabeth, arrived in America, entered the Palipico Sound, now in North Carolina, and sailed thence to Roanoke, Virginia. Of this country he took possession on his return to England, gave so splendid a description of it that Queen Elizabeth bestowed upon it the name of Virginia, an allusion to her being unmarried. In 1602, Bartholomew Grusnell discovered some part of New England. He first touched on its eastern coast in about 43 degrees of north latitude. He made some discoveries of the adjacent ports, and gave them the name of Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. In 1603, the French made some small discoveries, and began to settle at Port Royal and the Bay of Fundy. In 1608, Henry Hudson discovered Long Island. He also discovered and gave the name to Hudson River, which retains this name to the present time. Just a note, the birth parentage of the early education Columbus has been extracted from the valuable work which has recently appeared from the able pen of Washington Irving. So we finished the introduction. The next program will be Chapter 2, From the Settlement of Jamestown to the Embarkation of the Plymouth Company. So I will finish there. This is a picture of Douglas Jamerson and his wife, and there's myself, Gretchen Schmitt, the founder, director of Pittsuburgh Victorian Gibson Girls, and we were invited with a 2-day notice to bring in my choir of 40 gals dressed in Victoriana in Civil War costume at that time, to sing with Douglas Jamerson, who's a well-known singer of Stephen Foster songs, in the celebration of the 100th anniversary of Stephen Foster. Also, I want to share with you antiques, and if you're interested in any of the antiques, if you send me $30, and just look at Etsy.com, Trout Lily, but if you just send me a check for $30, and I'll put $6 toward the shipping. And I'm too antiquated to to have to go through eBay, but I am on eBay, and I'm on eBay, GinGee GoodEarth, but the things I show you here won't be on eBay. But anything that I show you, if you would like, it's you must, email me right away that you're interested in the object, and in the meantime, send me a check for $30, and I'll put $6 toward the shipping and packaging. And if you like this item right here, it's very beautiful. And then we also have the, this is a car ornament, and this is also $30. Just the Indian head car ornament is $30. If any of those items you're interested in, just go ahead and email me at GibsonGirls with a S at mailman without the man.com. So it's GibsonGirls@mail.com. And I also have this item. And anyway, I just washed it too, so I have to dry it. And I wanted to go ahead and read on I have a short chapter on the history of Norway. So I'm going to read that. And you can only read so much in a day. And remember, this is all, ad-libbing. This is a nice dish. It's a sectional 3. And you can see. So if you'd like that. And let's go to the book on Norway. And I'm going to put on music again. This is a children's book. And I also wanted to mention a very simple recipe in this time of crisis. As a dietitian, I have a great recipe. I guess I'm going to have to tell you by memory because I can't find it now. But basically you buy a can of black beans, a can of corn, and it would probably be a fourth a cup or less of mayonnaise, a half teaspoon of cumin, chopped purple onion, a half a cup, and a half a cup of celery chopped. And this can be all stirred together and put in the refrigerator overnight, and it's a nice side dish. It's a nice salad side dish. You can add salt and pepper to it. And it's one of my favorite recipes. Now here's the fun part. Because of the food crisis, you buy a case of black beans, and they're usually 50 cents a can, and you buy a case of fresh corn kernels that are canned. Now you can add pimento to this too, but it's a quick way to create satiety, and it's very inexpensive, and you can have it on hand. So if you had to make this dish, it's lovely. I found the recipe. A fourth cup of Hellmann's, 2 tablespoons lime juice, a half teaspoon of ground cumin, a can of black beans, rinsed and drained, a can of whole kernel corn, drained, a cup of quartered grape tomatoes or cherry tomatoes. I leave out the tomatoes. A half cup of chopped red onion, 2 tablespoons of fresh cilantro, and a teaspoon of chopped jalapeno pepper is optional, and I never put the jalapeno pepper in it. And this is another picture that I made, and this is also for sale. I made this with an obsidian arrow point. Okay, and that's also for sale. It's $30. And so now we're going to go back to storytelling and enjoy the music in the background. I can't wait to get this up on the YouTube channel. So we're just going to read the foreword to the Vikings. The story of how Eric the Red and his son Leif sailed to the west and discovered Greenland and the continent of North America is a true story. I have tried to write a true book about their discoveries, but I want to tell you at once that not everything that you will read in this book is a fact. All the facts that we know about Eric and Leif and their voyages are here, but in between the facts I have put some fiction. I did not do this just to amuse you or myself or to make the book more exciting. I did it because the fictional parts of the book tell true things about the way people lived and acted and felt in Norway and Iceland and Greenland 1,000 years ago. For instance, you will find that in this book, Leif Erikson has a good friend named Brendan, who is an Irish slave boy. Brendan is not a real character in the sense that Leif and Eric are, but when the Norse, which means Norway, settled in Iceland, they brought a great number of Irish slaves with them. Probably about a quarter of the population was Irish. That's very interesting. And again, this book was written by Elizabeth Janeway and Random House Publishing, 1951. So we're going to finish that at there, and we'll continue tomorrow. And I'm going to end up with a quote. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Ralph Waldo